the rate I'm going, people are going to get their Christmas presents around June.
That's right. All right, and here we go. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the StoryTech Know Before You Go pre-CES primer. We do this webinar every year to help our audience know before you go pre-CES Sorry guys, I'm primer. We do this every year. Sorry, that was a little back volume on me. We do this every year to help everyone understand what are some of the trends that are bubbling up on the show floor at CES, so you can be better prepared to attend the show and really enjoy it. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about what StoryTech does at CES. We actually give tours of the show floor. And so some of the trends that we're going to be talking about today are the trends that we'll be discussing on our tours. And we have brought together a crew of experts on these trends who all occupy different roles in the industry, who all will be demonstrating their trends on the CES show floor as well with their companies and their business. And so we're going to have a great dialogue today to dig into these trends. So first, I also wanted to introduce our crew here on the call and some of our sponsors today. So first we have Chris Ullrich from Immersion. Immersion is one of our sponsors today. Chris, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. And we also have the fabulous Chris Pizzuro from Canoe Ventures, who's also sponsoring the StoryTech Tours today.
Hi, everyone.
And then the fabulous Jeanette DePatie, who is a StoryTech partner and from Propeller Head Media.
Hi, that's me.
And then Hardie Tankersley from Reality Fabrications, who's going to be digging into the future of VR and AR.
Hi, everybody.
And to start off today's call, our partner from Digiday, David Amrani, who's going to talk to us about the first trend that we're going to dig into, which is called the wisdom of the crowd. And this has to do with the new role that the crowd has taken in our world, from crowdfunding and influencers to all the madness that happened with fake news and influencers during the election. So David, tell us about the wisdom of the crowd. Can everybody hear David?
No.
We can't hear you right now. All right, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. All right, so let's do Chris Pizzuro from Canoe Ventures. We're going to jump over to another trend, which has to do with the future of content, and we're calling this blurred lines. And this is all about really how content now, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, whether you're watching a movie on your phone, on your TV set, how is all this content going to manage? What is the future of the content experience for us? And so Chris from Canoe Ventures, who is an advertising technology company, is helping manage all these different platforms for advertisers. So Chris, tell us about Canoe Ventures and where the world is going in content.
Sure. Well, specifically in terms of television content, we've seen year over year, and the big headlines are that TV content is declining and advertising revenues are declining, and that makes for good flashy press. But the real nuts and bolts and the truth to the matter is that while linear content ratings are down, if you look at Nielsen, and it's been that way for quite some time, TV as a whole is actually up and way up. When you define TV as content viewing and advertising upon a quality television show that plays out on multiple platforms, and multiple platforms being such as where Canoe puts advertising into cable video on demand. So if you go to Time Warner or Charter Cable or Comcast and you go to the VOD menu and you play, if you're hate watching Kardashians or something, and you play out a content stream and an ad gets placed, that goes through Canoe. And there's plenty of other streaming outfits that are out there now. There's quality products from Hulu, and DirecTV has now come online with the product, all of which will be out at the show. Sling TV from Dish. And all of our approaches are fairly consistent in terms of a quality product to the consumer that they can easily access. And either insert advertising as in traditional linear TV, or a subscription model for $4.99 or $9.99 or some combination of both. So we'll see all of that out on the floor from all of these companies. main thing to watch from whether it's technology that Canoe has, or folks like Freewheel or Google DFP and all of these front ends to the consumer. What makes TV and the programming and the content what it is, and that is that there's quality, right? There's quality in the content and how it's shot, and it's not just cat videos at home. Nothing against cat videos at home, but when we're talking about television, there's that. There's always been a convenience to TV, and the new platforms, streaming platforms that are out there. They address that pretty well, but there's still some way to go. So, when you're looking on the floor and looking at various options, yes, they are convenient, but you also need to have the quality aspect to them. So they kind of play off each other. And the third leg of the stool is scale. In order for these things to replace television, there needs to be to scale to them. And that's something that Canoe will be talking about in terms of cable VOD at your briefings, Lori, before the program, is we'll have our most recent 2016 numbers to talk about in Q1 and how those are in the billions. So, TV is quality, convenience at scale. And I encourage everyone to hold their what they're looking at the show up to that lens.
Chris, I just wanted to ask you a question. Do you think that you're going to be basically always paying attention to whatever new screen and platform becomes available? So one of our trends this year is the ups and downs of autonomy. And a lot of the excitement on the CES floor this year is going to be in the North Hall and the LVC with autonomous vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at cars that drive themselves and lots of models around mobility, where there will be screen in these cars. So are you guys also looking at the connected car as the next place where you'll be able to manage advertising?
I've always considered the car sort of the ultimate mobile device, right? Today, our mobile device, it's talked about as being the phone, which is true. Yes, I think absolutely you're going to see the mobility of the car. It's traditional mobile device. But take on the qualities and targeting advertising capabilities that is now today in your phone, and how those two interact. So yes, I'm actually excited to make my way over there and see what possibilities are presenting themselves on the floor.
Fantastic. So let's jump over now to David from Digiday. Are you good, David? I think you just have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute? There you go. No, still not? Okay, we're still not hearing you. All right, we're going to jump over to Hardie, and you continue to troubleshoot. We see your face. You look good. So we're going to jump over to Hardie Tankersley from Reality Fabrication Co. And Hardie's going to talk to us also on this content trend, this blurred lines trend, about the future of AR and VR, which of course has been the big buzz in Hollywood this year about all the funding going into VR and AR. So Hardie, can you give us sort of a summary of what you're looking at and what you're thinking about when it comes to that hot trend?
Yeah, so trend-wise, VR is certainly a trend. AR is certainly the emerging trend. Content-wise, I think the industry's in a place where we don't yet know what it is. We're trying to figure it out. Is it a games business? So there are a lot of games developers building VR games, and or is it an entertainment? Is it a TV or a cinema spinoff? Is it a storytelling medium or is it a gaming medium? And we've now had, I think, enough products on the market for long enough to start to get a sense of what is working and what isn't, and so we have the HTC Vive and the Oculus, who are really come from a gaming background. I really tried to dig into gaming with storytelling content on the side. And so we have a few indie developers and a few indie content folks who are selling a few copies of things into that market and starting to see what works. But I think what we're not seeing, I think the gaming guys are disappointed in not seeing what looks like a traditional console gaming business. They don't get to sell titles for $50 or $60 each that are playable for 50 or 60 hours. but the costs are still comparable to developing a console video game. So I think what we're going to see at CES is that split. You're going to see a lot of the gaming companies that are still trying to find a gaming audience for this stuff, but the big upgrades are going to be in other new kinds of content. So this being CES, obviously it's really going to be more about the hardware and about the devices than it is about the content. The first generation high-end VR rigs, well, even mobile VR rigs, have been on the market long enough now to get some traction, and we're about through the cycle of the first generation of devices. So I think we're going to start to see, everybody thinks we're going to see the second generation of devices previewing in various forms at CES from people like HTC and Oculus. I think we're also going to see the first wave of Microsoft Windows 10 VR devices. Microsoft announced a VR platform a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago. And a lot of their PC manufacturers have announced an intention to jump on with mobile VR devices. So that's people like HP and Dell and Lenovo and Asus and Acer. So they'll probably be showing their first gen of Windows VR devices, which will be interesting. There will also be the first wave of Google Daydream devices. So Google's got their own Pixel phone, but I think we're going to see Daydream devices from Asus and some others. There's also rumors about an Asus device that has Daydream plus Tango. So you're going to start to see the augmented reality dedicated devices. So it can sense the environment around it and render graphics in real time on the world. So they'll be showing that. There are also a bunch of miscellaneous headsets we're going to see. We'll probably see ODG again, which is the company that's built an augmented reality glasses. So it's got little displays inside the glasses, and you can superimpose graphics on the real world. It's pretty lightweight little glasses device, rechargeable. Runs about $700 to $800 depending, and those things are getting a little bit better this year. They were showing their first gen last year, so I expect to see some upgrades from them. And then I think we'll also see, I think Oculus may be showing, and I don't know if they'll do it publicly, but they'll certainly be showing privately their mobile device. So Oculus a couple of weeks ago split the company into two companies, one for PC-based VR and one for standalone or mobile VR. So they're building a device that's self-contained that goes on your head that can do full VR, but doesn't have to tether to a PC. So I expect they'll be at least talking about it. I don't know what they'll actually have to show, but they'll be there in force, I think. And then what'll be really interesting is the whole category of tiny little VR startups. I suspect we'll see a wave of Chinese companies with headsets. I think there are already thousands of them in China. The VR market in China really seems to be exploding. And there are just a zillion little devices that various crews in Shenzhen have put together and are putting on the market. So it'll be very interesting to see that range of devices and what they can and can't do. I think we'll also see a lot of 360 videos, all the camera guys. You'll see Samsung and Nikon and Sony and GoPro, all with new iterations of 360 cameras, all the way from little consumer devices that are getting really cheap with multiple lenses for home use, all the way up to professional rigs. I think you'll see from GoPro and probably from Sony and some others that have a lot of lenses. The Nokia Ozo, I suspect may or may not be there if they have any money left. So we'll see a lot of 360 video solutions. content-wise, there's something else to just keep track of if you're going. There's a big keynote from NVIDIA. The CEO is giving a keynote on Wednesday. They'll probably be announcing some updates to the graphics cards as superpower VR will continue to get cheaper and faster and more widespread. And like other people like AMD have been talking about mobile VR rigs like backpack PCs. So you'll get the spectrum from mobile phone power to laptop power to backpack power to full render desktop power. All those devices will be there. So there'll be tons of hardware. I think you'll also see tons of new accessories and controllers. Lots of little startups are doing crazy things like exercise kits, and like somebody's got like a rowing machine that has VR in it that you can virtually row down the river. There's exercise equipment, there's treadmills and unidirectional things so you can run and walk in VR space. There will be lots of different hand controllers and different devices for different scenarios, whether it's gaming, whether guns, or specific other business applications. There'll be tons of little devices, especially since HTC now has an open tracking API. Lots of people are building devices to work with the Vive architecture.
Hey, Hardie, just a question for you, just because while we have Chris and everybody else here, and we're going to talk to Immersion shortly about what they're doing to create immersive engagement on mobile devices. But I was just curious, on the advertising side, do you see Canoe Ventures and all the work that you're doing, do you see VR, AR also starting to cater on the monetization side of some of this content? You know, advertising, will that get into the VR play? I know we're seeing advertisers do VR pieces of content, which mostly is a PR play, but you know, do we think this is going to be another place? And anyone can jump in on this one.
Well, I'll start. There are a lot of startups that are trying to build ad businesses in VR. We're still in a stage of VR where everybody's trying to take previous concepts and now in VR. So we have ad serving in VR, we have ad engines in VR, we have targeting machines, we have all the things that you have on the web. Somebody is trying to do in VR, whatever that means. And I think we also have all of the agencies, the creatives, and the sponsors creating custom content. So there's tons of 360 and VR content being created by brands as experiences. But I don't yet know that we're in a stage yet where you can scale into real business.
Anyone from the panel want to address that?
Well, I think 360 is a little ahead of the other spaces. I mean, VR is still fairly limited in who's going to go through the process of putting even a cardboard on. But 360 is fairly ubiquitous now with Facebook and YouTube. So we're seeing a lot of ads starting to scale just in that tiny little piece, I think. Coca-Cola and some of the other major brands.
Chris, anything on your side?
Sure, and both have mentioned that scale word, right? When it comes to a media buyer, and if he's looking to just somehow insert a 30-second spot or something into VR or AR, you know, something as simple as that, so to speak. Yeah, that's going to take some sort of scale for an advertiser to kind of jump in. Where I do think I've seen, you know, the immediate opportunities is more of branded content in those spaces where someone's getting, you know, more bang for their buck. Scale's certainly important there, but there is that the prestige of being in the space first, and usually reasons why a Coca-Cola or someone will dive into a space there. So I think we see it more on the branded content aspect than just throwing a 30-second spot over or something. That's usually how things like this will start, and then the market will develop from there.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's
I want to make a plug
go
for
ahead.
something interesting in that branded content. A lot of the branded content going on is automotive. And since CES has become this big automotive show, where all those guys are going to be there, I suspect you're going to see some interesting VR experiences in the automotive side. Jaguar did a really amazing piece for the Vive where you can explore their new car in a bunch of different ways in a full VR experience. A lot of the automotive guys, I know Audi's working on a configurator where you can go into the dealer and choose your options, and configure your car using VR. So there's tons of VR stuff going on in automotive, and I think we might see some interesting intersections there. Lori, we can't hear you.
Sorry. David, do you have audio?
Do I?
Oh, right. Okay.
Wonderful.
All right, because we're going to lose David in 10 minutes, so I want to jump into his trend, which is, again, on the crowd and the role that the crowd has really played culturally, from a content perspective, from a business perspective, and from all these different technology trends. So from Digiday, tell us your thoughts on the power of the crowd.
Sure. I mean, you put it pretty well, pretty succinctly, right? People are better at telling, at telling us what they want than we are sort of anticipating those wants. And as we get more, this is both through technology and just sort of like the networking that it elicits, as we get more economies of scale and sort of distributed capital through these networks, they're also a lot more capable of bringing about what they want through crowdfunding, through crowdsourcing of projects and things like that. But we shouldn't really mistake, I guess, the wisdom in big data, which we're often looking to as a proxy for the wisdom in the crowd, as a real indication of, what necessarily we should be serving audiences or consumers or really anyone in sort of a digital context without giving it more scrutiny than that. The idea of using big data to sort of identify what people are looking for, what products are about to surge and all that, it works in terms of product recommendations and fora like that. But when you move into the terrain of a publisher, which is obviously what we are looking at for the most part, obviously we cover these other entities in sort of the media ecosystem, but we are ourselves a publisher. Media entities, publishers can become sort of enablers of echo chamber effects if they're too concentrated on listening to sort of the voice of the crowd. Because what those audiences are often saying is what they want, which is something you want to know, but you also want to know as a publisher, as an editor, what they need. And that's a very crucial, at least in my opinion, in the sort of the mission of Digiday, that's a crucial tenet of this idea of the media, of journalism specifically, as a public good. And so as we get further and further away from that, as we sometimes maybe are afraid to lose a few ad dollars to tell hard truths or things that our core audience might not be the happiest to hear, and rather just serve them the types of articles that they're looking for, which is, can often be sort of sensational or personalized or something like this. As we get further from that model as a public good, we start to see some sort of difficult symptoms. We start to see sort of like a Netflix effect. Web 4.0 is all about personalization. So a lot of the technologies, and we're going to see a lot of these at CES, and we've been seeing a lot of these sort of over the years, are great at aggregating sort of your daily me, which is a list of things, a list of stories or destinations on the web that cater specifically to what you're looking for. And by doing so, sort of eschew topics and ideas that might not be the most native to sort of your way of thinking or something like that. So this, I guess, sort of like dulls the pain of any sort of cognitive dissonance that might come from being confronted with alternate views, but it also sort of feeds confirmation bias, which is the other end of that sword. And you lose a sense of discovery in all of this. So there are publishers who aren't sort of just going with the voice of the crowd, which I would say the New York Times is a great one, sort of focusing on, and at least what the editorial staff there deems is important, rather than just sort of, watching the dashboard to see, what's doing well, what hot topics or popular topics are sort of surfacing. I think that every player is sort of going to have a different role, a different response in how they deal with this issue. And I do believe it is an issue, especially when we're just looking at sort of the climate right now, the political climate, the sort of the public sphere at the moment. And especially today we see a very direct sort of circumstance of this, where we had, a general election, and now we're having a small group of electors, and whose choice is it really to determine what the fate of all this is. And everybody to that, and of course to the media question, they're going to have a different response. And I think that their response to that question is going to say a lot about their character, and also about the mission that they see for themselves in the media ecosystem, what role they think they should be fulfilling. And brands are going to have to answer this as well. I mean, brands have been sort of like slapped around a little bit, especially in the latter half of the year and the latter half of the election, in terms of sounding off on things that necessarily the crowd, their audience, wasn't very happy to hear about. And their response is going to be sort of equally interesting.
Excellent. Does anyone want to jump in or comment on those points about the crowd from your perspectives? Anybody? All right, we might lose our friend from Digiday in a few minutes because he has another call, which is why I was trying to get him on. Let's jump over to our friend at Immersion. And if you haven't heard of Immersion, you're going to soon. Immersion is a company that builds touch experiences with haptics, which allows you to physically experience touch on your phone and on other devices. And so we're going to talk to Chris, who's going to tell us a little bit about what Immersion is up to. And this falls into our trend, which we're calling the rise of Skynet, or Human 2.0, which is really about the rise of artificial intelligence, biometrics, and all these different solutions coming together that play into ubiquitous computing and really immersing us into experiences and our technology learning from our behavior. So Chris, tell us about what's going on in the haptic world.
Sure. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So over at Immersion, we're very interested in using the sense of touch for human-computer interaction. We sort of, if you can imagine a company that specializes in one physical human sense, that's what Immersion does. We just specialize in touch. And so as we think about this topic area of, Skynet, it's pretty far out there from my perspective. But coming back more to the, sort of contemporary times, I think what we see is the evolution of human-computer interaction in terms of more intelligent and more adaptive and more sort of situation or scenario-specific computing that can help us to know what's going on in the world around us. And so what we think about is how you use the sense of touch to leverage that or to enhance it in some meaningful way. A good example of that, which you'll see a lot of at CES, will be in the auto pavilion, where you see a lot of auto manufacturers starting to use touch in their human-computer interfaces, in the center stack, in the nav systems, but also in the controls, so the primary and secondary controls of your car. As we think about cars becoming autonomous, there's probably going to be a phase where they become semi-autonomous or smarter. Think about the Tesla sort of staying in its lane and so on. You can use the fact that the driver is almost always touching some part of the car or the car surface to give them some feedback or information about what the car is doing, or maybe give them alerts, or maybe give them some other useful information to help them to control the semi-autonomous behavior of the vehicle better. When we think about other areas like the hot topic of VR and AR, then now we're talking about how we could use the sense of touch to increase the sense of immersion or presence in a remote environment or in a simulated environment. If you think about walking around the world around you, if you go and stick your hand and try to grab a doorknob or something and your hand goes right through it, it's pretty much a sensation of that thing not being real. And so at Immersion, what we try to think about is how we can try to make these virtual environments feel real and convince your brain at a very low level that there's an actual tangible reality going on in this virtual environment. And then you can imagine extending that again to something like augmented reality, where you're now overlaying a mixed reality experience on top of a real environment. And you can give this sort of seamless feeling to the user about there being tangible reality to things that are being simulated. So think about, simulating a figurine or something on your desk, then you can reach out and touch it. Well, that thing's not real, but through the sense of touch, you can convince your brain that it's actually really there. So that's a very exciting area for us. In the very short term, in mobility, what we see is that there's a huge install base of devices now, something like 3 billion or more devices that actually have some level of touch capability on them. So stepping back from the sort of ultimate reality of being able to touch and feel things, like I was saying about it in VR, in your phone you have this vibration capability that's pretty much overlooked from our perspective. People typically associate it with just getting alerts that there's an incoming call or something like that. But what we figured out is that you can actually modulate the behavior of the vibration part of your phone to give you a richer, tangible component to a video experience or to a social experience or to some other component of mobile communication that you're using the device for. And so actually what we're going to be showing at CES is some examples of our recently launched mobile ad technology, which tries to enhance video, mobile video, short form video, with a tactile component. And what we see is that by adding this component to a video, sometimes users notice and sometimes they don't, but what always happens is that they have a richer, more meaningful experience, and what we see is lifts in all these certain KPIs around the ad performance. And so if you add sort of ad touch feedback to a car ad, for example, which is an obvious one, then you can feel the engine roaring, you can feel the car cornering, that kind of stuff. But also in like a Doritos ad or something like that, you can enhance the chip crunch sensation, right? You can create an attention for the user in a way that's sort of fun and playful, and it draws their attention into the ad format, into the ad content itself. And we think that it increases memorability, it increases, the duration that people watch the ads and so on. And so it's generally an interesting and fun technology, and we're trying to get this out there and make it available across the marketplace.
I think your title, which is user experience and analytics, really speaks to what you're talking about. How important is UI now with all this touch? And anyone can jump in as well on this, but it seems to me the experience you have now with devices and content is just as paramount, right, as just watching.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you see people, for example, sitting on a subway, holding their phone, when they're commuting to work or whatever, and that experience of being, having the device in your hand, the mass of the device, the way that it feels, this is all extremely important to the total experience of the device. But also, if you can imagine having parts of that be programmable or parts of that experience being dynamic, then you could modulate the touch experience in a way that's meaningful for users. Another example you might think of is work Immersion did a long time ago. I think the most common user interface that you can imagine for anyone using is the mouse and the keyboard. Well, certainly the mouse has got a very sort of fixed form factor, but you can imagine, as we move to VR or as we move to AR experiences, those things kind of go away. And it becomes challenging to think about how you're going to do productive work other than just have entertainment experiences. What controller, what interface are you going to use to enable you to interact with these VR and AR environments? That's the space where Immersion is trying to sort of set a standard around a level of touch that people should expect. Because it's easy for designers or for OEMs to just go to an easy, cheap, low-cost solution, but we think that does a disservice to the users by not giving them enough capability, both in terms of affordances and usability, but also in terms of touch and touch feedback in that very important dimension.
That's cool. Chris, any thoughts on that, Jeanette, on the introduction of haptic as a new exciting area?
Well, I think anything that you do that engages the consumer senses is going to make that communication more impactful. And I know that there's been some studies that show that haptics make ads much more memorable. So that's certainly part of it. But I think as part of this sort of augmented humanity, we're also seeing touch integrated into things like prosthetics. And I think we're going to see some really exciting developments along those lines as well.
Excellent. Hardie or Chris, anything you want to add there?
I will just say from definitely on the interfacing from our point of view in cable VOD, where there's Comcast has a product called X1 that's in many of their homes now, and it's a new way to interface with your television. And two things in that: there's typical just interfacing around the way you traditionally think of interfacing, but now there's key art. And also voice commands, right, to your set-top box. And for us, the VOD views in an X1 household are actually over 25% more views to video on demand in X1 homes than non-X1 homes in Comcast. Same content, same distribution, essentially. It is purely improvements on interfacing that's driving engagement by the consumer, and therefore the point made about, therefore more effective advertising per se, purely just interfacing.
And I think there's also another, to piggyback on trends, another trend in VR of being able to represent touch and your hands and other body parts in VR in more realistic ways. So we've had these first generation controllers that look like game controllers. Oculus just released their touch controller, which tries to more closely mimic the way your hands really work. HTC is about to launch their second generation controllers, which are really more form-fitting to the hands. So that whole industry, everybody's trying to migrate more towards more natural interaction with the virtual world using touch. And we'll see a lot of that very soon.
Fabulous. Well, to wrap it all up, let's go to Jeanette DePatie from Propellerhead Media and a fabulous StoryTech partner and great tech writer to talk about our last trend, which is all about how IoT is really hitting adolescence right now. And so all the different things that we've been talking about are really rising to the surface because of sensors. So Jeanette, talk to us about what's going on with IoT.
Well, I think, we've moved beyond the smartwatch. There's still plenty of smartwatches out there, but that's not really the new or hot thing. Except from the fashion standpoint, I think we've reached sort of an upper limit to how much stuff people are willing to wear. We don't want to walk around looking like Sputnik with antennas sticking out all over the place. So people are becoming more selective about wearables. So we're seeing some big partnerships with, say, Fitbit and Tory Burch and other sort of young and hip fashionable brands attaching to this tech. There's been a sort of tech wave in the fashion world this year. I mean, Chanel had a lot of backgrounds that look like giant servers on the runway in Paris. And they worked with Intel to do biometric feedback from the models onto the wall. And so there's a lot of stuff that's happening in fashion and IoT. But what we're really seeing is a movement away from IoT gimmicks towards IoT that really does something. I call it the Internet of getting things done. Because sensors are great, but all of this data coming in is not all that useful if it's not being filtered or used in a productive way. So we're seeing things like sensors that note when kids are having night terrors, but it also attaches to a slight buzzer that wakes the child up before the night terrors begin. So it uses this data to actually physically do something in the real world. And so, we've still got all the goofy stuff. We've got connected umbrellas that are attached to weather reports and all of that sort of stuff. But we're really seeing devices that are either integrating into big systems like Google Home or Alexa, or actually physically doing something in the real world, like candles, right? Who would have thought a connected candle is a good thing? But it's an actual candle with a flame, and if it tips over, it shuts off. Well, if it keeps your house from burning down, that's a useful thing. So, I'm not sure if it just sent me alerts, that would be so helpful. I mean, this is a sample of old IoT versus new IoT, right? So sending me a note on my cell phone versus not burning my house down. That's the big shift that I think we're seeing right now in this space. Oops. Lori, I think you're muted.
There we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Does anybody on the panel have anything to add about IoT and how it's interfacing with their worlds? Obviously, we're very excited about where IoT is going, and my house is certainly filled with Alexas who keep me company during the day. How is it wrapping into some of these other trends that you guys are digging into? Anybody?
I can hazard a comment. I think that the IoT stuff, certainly the 2.0 stuff that we're talking about, is very interesting and has a lot of potential value. I think the challenge will be how you enable users to manage all these different control points or different parts of their life that they can have sensory feedback around. It becomes very balkanized almost in the way that each different company in this space is advertising its services, and how can we try to find a way to unify that or make it more effective and useful so that people aren't in a place where they're frustrated and confused by the experience.
Excellent point. Jeanette,
and to piggyback trends to the other trend of the moment that somehow we haven't mentioned yet is AI. And so I think we're going to see a lot of conjunction between the IoT and AI making these devices smart, and your whole environment starting to learn about you and anticipate your needs, and it's going to get really interesting and creepy really fast.
Yeah.
Very. Now, I think there are companies that I've seen that are looking at ways to have security at the hub of the home so that these IoT devices don't get hacked. And I think in our trends report, Jeanette has written about the big hacking that happened for all the big sites with one of the domain providers, and how that was because many of us don't change the password that comes with these devices. We just don't, we're not tech heads and we don't do it. So there's definitely going to be a new awareness, I think, of being careful about all of this stuff. So anybody have any last words before we wrap out our Know Before You Go CES primer? Anybody want to jump in with any final comments? All right, well, you all look so handsome there. Go ahead, Jeanette, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think with all the voice commands and all of these different devices, we're going to look a little bit like touched in the head for the next decade.
Yeah.
We're just going to be talking to our cars and our phones and all. I mean, I guess I always did, but they never talked back. So this will be a new experience for consumers. Just as we got used to the Bluetooth headsets, it's going to be a whole other shift in consumer behavior.
Well, look,
I feel like we're going to have to start working hard for our devices. We're going to have to think hard about what you want. Now I have to start planning. Oh God, what music do I want to play when I get home? Where do I want my car to park itself? What color do I want my lights at different moments? These are all. I have more work than ever now that all the devices are asking what I want.
At least until you enable the biometric feature that knows your mood and does all that stuff automatically, which is both wonderful and terrifying at the same time.
Well, and I can also see all that haptic stuff, like waking up your friends if they fall asleep in a meeting, right?
Right.
Chris, are you guys looking at that at Immersion? How to keep people up in meetings?
We're actually looking at how to enable surreptitious under the table haptic communication during.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's a big market.
Well, I live in LA. I want to control the haptics in the car, the next lane over. That's what I really want.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining our Know Before You Go webinar. It's a great primer for all the trends that we're going to be seeing at CES. And so we're looking at the future of humanity with one of our trends. And of course, we had our great partner, Chris Ullrich from Immersion, talking about that. And then also blurred lines, which is our trend around the future of content with the fabulous Chris Pizzuro from Canoe Ventures. And also the future of content with Hardie Tankersley from Reality Fabrication, talking about VR and AR and where that's going. And then also IoT now hitting adolescence with Jeanette DePatie from Propeller Media. This is Lori H. Schwartz from StoryTech. We're a provider of VIP tours at CES, so we hope you join us. If you want to contact us, it's lori@story-tech.com. Please check out all of our fabulous partners on this webinar, and we hope to see you walking on the floors at CES. Have a great holiday, everybody, and thank you, fabulous panelists, and thank you for YouTube for this working.
Thank you,
Bye,
Lori.
everybody.
In Vegas.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.